Phosphorus is naturally found in nucleic acids, phospholipids, and ATP. But following through the phosphorus cycle, what's really critical for you is the tracking of the polyatomic phosphate ion. And so we're going to track it through both terrestrial ecosystems and marine ecosystems. Generally speaking, you're going to have the largest amount of the reservoir coming from just the natural weathering process of rocks. And so you're often going to find these in just sedimentary rock of marine origin. But we're going to start with the soil because we're looking at the general weathering of rock process. And so for a terrestrial ecosystem, that phosphate ion that was found in the soil, that's going to then be taken up and absorbed by primary producers. These primary producers then are going to use this phosphate in their synthesis of organic compounds. And so through the process of photosynthesis, we're then of course going to have consumption. And so that consumption by a primary consumer, secondary consumer, so on and so forth, that's going to now track this into any consumer that we've discussed in a food web. That consumer is going to have one of two options here for our phosphate. That consumer is either just going to release waste, as we've discussed, or it's going to actually have the decomposition of the biomass of the consumer. And so if you are looking at the diagram here, we just tracked this portion of the cycle. If we now take a look at phosphate ion, not through a terrestrial ecosystem, but through the marine ecosystem, then now, once again, I'm going to start with just phosphate found in the soil because generally we're adding it through the weathering of rock process. And so this is going to get dissolved into some sort of marine life in the form of looking at just the water. And so the phosphate in the soil is going to essentially leach into groundwater. And then this groundwater is going to essentially become the surface water that we're viewing. And so now from here, this phosphate is now going to be able to get dissolved back into the ocean, back into the sea. And so you're tracking the process of land with soil leaching into the groundwater. That phosphate is now going to reach the surface water and eventually into the sea.